In a seller's market, speed and strategy matter. I'm Andrew Timms from Loan Market.
And I'm Paul Hixon. And today we're going to show you 6 powerful tactics to win your next property.
To secure a property quickly and easily and put your offer to the front of the pile, often removing conditions from the purchase contract can get you into first place.
The standard contract in Queensland is designed to protect the buyer. It has clauses built into it that you can get out of the contract if something goes wrong, if your finance has a problem or if there's a problem with the property. What we're going to do is we're going to show you how to make your offer more competitive by adjusting some of those clauses and putting yourself ahead of some of the other buyers. Firstly, Timsy, building and pests. Can you explain what it is and how we can get around it?
Building and pest inspection is an inspection on the property which looks at the property to see if it's structurally unsound, if the property's got pests such as termites. If these flag up in a building and pest report, you're obviously going to be very wary to buy that property. If you want to remove that clause, there is risk that comes with that. However, these days, most owners are getting a building and pest report complete. So you can look at that and go through that report. And if there is any issues that you flag, it might be ideal to get your own. However, to speed up or put your offer to being more competitive, removing that would be a good idea. When booking a building and pest, contact your local building and pest provider with good reviews. It should really only take a couple of days to get them in to do that report and get it back to you.
So the finance clause in a Queensland contract is generally 14 to 21 days. The finance clause allows for, if you are not approved for finance, that you can pull out the contract and get your deposit back. And so you're safeguarded by that finance clause in case something goes wrong. Shortening your finance clause can put you ahead of other buyers. Other buyers who are asking for a 14 or 21 day finance clause don't look as prepared as you could be if you go for a shorter finance clause of maybe 5 business days. The way we prepare you for that is we make sure you've got a pre-approval and you've got multiple lenders that can provide you with the money. The next step is to remove the finance clause altogether and to go completely unconditional for finance. It puts you ahead of other buyers. If a cash offer, what we call a cash offer, is when there's no finance clause involved, that puts you up ahead of anybody else who wants to put 5, 7, 14 days finance. It's the hottest offer you can make. So Timsy, what's the cooling off period?
Cooling off period is a clause in the contract which enables you to pull out of that contract if you don't want to move ahead with the property. You have a change of mind 5 days in and you decide, actually, this property is not for us, you can pull out with that clause in the contract. So removing that clause from the contract puts your offer in a much stronger position and will put you ahead of many other buyers who have that clause in there. An alternative strategy could be to reduce your cooling off period from 5 business days down to, say, 2 business days. Or removing the cooling off period altogether is definitely going to put you in a stronger buying position. So Paul, we've both used this strategy. Another tactic is making finance subject to valuation. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, that's right. So instead of having a finance clause for 5 or 7 days, we can simply make it subject to a suitable valuation. So what that does for the buyer is it gives them, they've got confidence they've already got finance approved, and all they need to do to get to unconditional is have a valuation done. Get the valuation done, the valuation comes in at the right number, and then we can move ahead and go to unconditional.
Yeah, so Paul, what steps can a buyer take to actually action this?
So instead of having a finance clause, it's changing the finance clause to be simply subject to valuation. It's probably going to be a secondary clause in the appendix of the contract, and instead of a finance clause being in there, it's just a subject to valuation. Talk to the agent about it. The agent's going to be interested because you're shortening those finance terms again.
So Paul, tell me about the power of countersigning and how this can help you negotiate and win that contract.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so countersigning contract. If you make an offer on a property and the agent comes back to you and says, no, they want you to increase the offer, what you could do is actually ask the vendor to countersign the contract. And what that means is, if you've made an offer of $1 million and you ask the vendor to countersign, the vendor might countersign at 1.2. And if they countersign at 1.2 and then you sign the contract again, the contract's yours. Or if they countersign and say 1.1, you know there's a smaller gap between you. So countersigning gives you an indication of where the vendor is sitting on price, and it will allow you to countersign back. So for an example, they countersign at 1.1, you countersign at $1,050,000. If they accept that offer of $1,050,000, they can countersign the contract and the contract is yours. So countersigning or asking the agent to get a countersign gives you visibility on what the vendor wants for the price, and that can get you ahead in this negotiation.
So Paul, the next tactic is, how do I win in this negotiation?
That's a really interesting one, because do you actually have to win this negotiation? We see it all the time that sellers and buyers end up fighting over numbers. Yes, it's money and it's a lot of money, but the buyer forgets that. They're trying to win the negotiation, not buy the home. So sometimes you actually just have to pay a bit more, get ahead of everybody else, and buy the property. Now, with the tactics we've talked about in the past of removing pests and buildings, removing the finance clause, putting in a valuation clause, they're all to help you get there. But sometimes you just have to buy it. Sometimes you have to be the person that pays a bit more to find the home that you want.
Especially in a hot market that we're in today.
So, Timsy, when should we use a buyer's agent?
You should use a buyer's agent if you are time poor. This is the big one. Often in today's busy world, we've got work commitments, family commitments. A buyer's agent are experts at finding really great opportunities for buyers. You will give them the spec of property that you like, location and budget, and they will source the market for the very best deals for your situation. These properties mightn't be on the market. Often, I think a stat, I was talking to a few buyer's agents, 30% of the properties they are buying are off market. So they can often negotiate really hard for you. They're experts at negotiation, so they can help potentially secure that $1 million property for $950. They come with fees that they charge at the buyer, so these generally range between 1.5% and 3%, depending on the buyer's agent and their experience.
So in summary, the powerful tactics to help you negotiate. You can remove the pest and buildings inspection. You can remove the cooling off period. You can reduce the finance terms. You can remove the finance terms altogether. You can ask for counter-signing. You can employ a buyer's agent, and you can just try and win this home for yourselves.
So this is just a guide. We advise you to contact your broker or finance expert to make sure that your offer is the most competitive one.